is the central bank's publication, and we are going to have that conversation with Dr. Vaalmikki Arjoon, economist, UWI lecturer. We say good morning to you. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good morning.
Can I have your overall views on the publication as it stands from the central bank, please?
Well, given the publication's figures and the analyses of the document, it does indeed signal that our economy is further weakening with worsening revenues, worsening current account deficit, worsening unemployment, and these unemployment figures aren't even up to date. And we still find, and they're reflective of what's been happening in the first 2 quarters of last year, and they're still getting worse. And we would find that as they do progress further to our present period, they're going to become much higher. And it signals worsening productivity in the economy. This is all to be expected, not just because our revenue gains from the energy sector, which traditionally has been our main bread and butter, is essentially declining quite heavily, but the fiscal and the monetary environments are still yet too harsh for the economy to bear. In fact, the tax burden on businesses are so impractical, and in addition to this, borrowing rates are quite high for these recessionary times.
But this is in the context, though, that the global economy actually grew modestly.
Yes, quite rightly, quite rightly so, and because the policy environments are too harsh, it's limiting the business environment, and limiting so essentially it's limiting investment activity and business activity as well, entrepreneurial activity. Now, despite a series of borrowings recently, we've not really made any serious, or there are very little plans as well to make serious productive investments, especially in non-energy sectors, to foster sustainable job creation, to foster increased technical capacity, infrastructure, and export diversification. In fact, our waning economic conditions are reflected by what the central bank is now beginning to call their quarterly index of economic activity, which was previously referred to as their quarterly GDP index. That index has declined in the 3rd quarter of 2016 by about negative 10.8%, and that until very recently would have actually been referred to by the central bank as their quarterly figure for GDP growth. So if we were to go by what they were previously referring to it as, we would say then that the economy, in the context of that figure, would have declined in the 3rd quarter of 2016 by negative 10.8%.
But you speak of sustainable employment. What are some of the quick wins or ways that we can try to have some quick hits while we show up resources to move forward towards the sustainable jobs that you mentioned?
Well, I think we need to look at a very holistic package in order to help boost any sort of employment initiative. You see, it all depends on 2 things. Number one needs to try to limit unemployment. So those who are already in jobs, we need to try to allow for them to retain their jobs, or at least for most of them to retain their jobs. But at the same time, we need to also engender certain policies that would attempt to help those who are out of jobs and those especially within the past 2 years who have lost their jobs, try to enter, if not necessarily into the same company or the same perhaps state enterprise, for example, or ministry where they would have lost their jobs, but to try to not just there, but to try to re-enter into perhaps the same industry or the same sector which they would have previously been employed in. So one thing that we need to consider is our financing package. Now, yes, we have had a spate of debt being incurred, and this debt that we've been told lately has been incurred to finance recurrent expenditure. Now, while we don't specifically know the details of this recurrent expenditure, it hasn't been broken down to us beyond that. What would have been better is that if this money were used to finance productive activities, especially in the non-energy sector, capital projects, for example, and many sorts of capital projects could have been done which in turn could have developed jobs for many of these individuals at the same time. Now, we need to pay attention specifically to our debt to GDP ratio. Our debt to GDP ratio has essentially worsened well over this past year. Now, debt in itself is not a bad thing, especially when you take out debt to create jobs and to create job sustainability, which is what we're speaking about at this point in time, right? But we're not actually seeing that occurring at this point. We're seeing debt being taken out to meet current recurrent expenditure, and we're not specifically even being told as to which aspects of this recurrent expenditure they're taking out this debt for. Is it, for example, is it being taken out to help pay Petrotrin workers' promised increase in salaries? Right? There's been no 100%. There's been no confirmation of this just as yet. But paying wages and salaries is part of recurrent expenditure. Is it being taken out to help facilitate certain transfers and subsidies, which also fall under recurrent expenditure? This we don't know. What would have been better is that we were told, okay, we're taking out a $1 billion debt from the domestic economy in order to finance this particular capital project in this particular sector, and we expect that it is going to create X amount of jobs, and it is going to save another certain number of jobs at the same point in time. This would have been a lot more beneficial for us, especially since next month we are going to be visited by the international credit rating agency Moody's. Right? We need to remember that all year round we are under the intense scrutiny of these international credit rating agencies, so that and they would be consistently monitoring our macroeconomic performance, our macroeconomic fundamentals, so that next month when Moody's does in fact visit, it's going to be very interesting to see what ratings they do provide for us right now.
Now moving back from that macro picture to a very specific one, I want you to walk that line, that middle line for me, please, between retaining jobs and getting new ones, and saying, okay, well, we're trying to streamline, we are trying to pool resources, with the example of TDC and how it is we're moving on that line.
Well, again, I think it all comes back down to how finances are spent. Now, we've recently seen not just TDC, we've seen other energy-based companies as well that are being closing down. Right? In fact, the recent MHTL plants that have been shut down as well, which has affected a large number of jobs. Again, it all comes back down to how expenditure is allocated within the country. And now let's take for instance the Tourism Development Corporation. What could be done is a more serious allocation of finances towards tourism in the country, with more strategic plans towards developing tourism within the country. We have not seen any sort of serious initiatives to develop tourism and tourism-based activities within Trinidad and Tobago for quite some time.
Is there any model that you see that we can take some elements from and adapt it to our situation?
Well, let's put it this way. We've just come out of the carnival season, but yet still we find that I mean, if one were to consider various recent figures from the CSO, owing to the recent carnival, and not just this carnival, but previous years in carnival, expenditure from tourist arrivals, from those visiting us for carnival, would have dropped. In fact, it would have dropped between 2015 to 2016 by almost $10 billion US. Now, and even the earnings that we would have attained from carnival were not that substantial compared to what we could be earning out there. What we need to embark on is firstly apply certain better marketing strategies to market our our country from a tourism perspective all year round, which would require certain cultural ambassadors being promoting Trinidad and Tobago tourism all year, not just specifically at one particular time of the year, but all year round at the same time.
And this is a conversation that we hope to continue with you, but thank you very much for your time this morning, Dr. Vaalmikki Arjoon, economist, UWI lecturer on Good Morning Trinidad and Tobago.